Hello, welcome to the Paddock Pass podcast. We're going to talk about historic day in MotoGP. Neil and I are camped out in the media centre. It's getting on for past 8 p.m. Of course, my name's Adam Wheeler, and Neil being Neil Morrison. He's on the other side of this room somewhere. This is like a long corridor of French power. And then we have Dave at home, who's been taking in the French GP from, well, the comfort of his abode in the Netherlands. Just a quick check-in, guys. How are we doing? How's the energy levels? Dave, are you all right?
I'm fine. Just waiting to send my wife a pizza later on. She's getting peckish.
Oh, speaking of pizza, Neil, I might be our stop, I think, on the way back into the centre of Le Mans. How are you holding up?
Yeah, I would say surviving completely on adrenaline. Le Mans is always one of the more demanding schedules just because you have to start very early to get in on time and you end up finishing very, very late. But I think what we saw today has given everyone a bit of a lift and given us a bit of a buzz, which is carrying me on at the moment.
Yeah, you know, one of my favourite things about today, it proves that old guys can still tug the heartstrings, can still cause emotional scenes. The energy of life is not just all about youth. Am I right, Dave?
No.
Okay.
Grey hair can still do it.
No.
Well, nothing to do with
I'm all Logan's Run on this one.
They were already referencing a film that half of the listeners won't get anyway, Dave.
Well, they should go and watch, and they should immediately rush off and watch Logan's Run and THX 1138, and that'll keep them going for a good evening, and that'll be very enjoyable, and they'll learn a thing or two.
Neil, can you try and sum up a little bit of the Johann Zarco impact here today?
Well, I think you just need to watch, or if you haven't already, rewatch the final lap of the race, the cool down lap. The scenes where he went to greet the crowd, ran over to do his backflip in front of the main grandstand here at Le Mans, Parc Fermé, and then the podium ceremony when they sang the Marseillaise in unison with the fans. I mean, it was a pretty spellbinding moment. We're probably going to start with moments. I mean, one of my moments was just seeing Johann Zarco's dad in the garage straight after the race, properly having a good old emotional cry. That did tug on my heartstrings, I must admit. And I think that was his first race. It was his mum's first ever race that she's come to see Johann racing. And apparently it was his dad's first race, his dad Yvonne's first race in, 10 years since he was racing in Moto 2. So they certainly picked a perfect occasion to come.
Yeah, I also felt a twang of sympathy for Johann's dad because he was missing a front tooth, apparently. And this is a problem I've had over the past couple of years. So I've got a nice shiny new one, which I'm hoping will stay in for a little while.
But you haven't been able to watch any offspring, conquer the world, Dave?
I have not. No, I have not. As far as I know, there is no. I'm leaving no genetic trace, which is probably for the best.
As far as you know.
As far as I know, yeah. God,
well,
yeah.
Neil teed it up. What was your moment from this Grand Prix? Was it Johann Zarco related or was it something else?
Well, I suppose it's sort of Johann Zarco related. My moment was Fabio Quartararo after qualifying. The crowd, genuinely quite sad that I'm not in Le Mans because this was really special. This is a really special weekend. It's always the atmosphere is always great, but for Fabio Quartararo being on pole and he arrives back in Parc Fermé and the crowd are going absolutely bonkers, and he's sort of jumping off his bike. They're all singing the Marseillaise, which is probably the best national anthem in the world because it does make you want to immediately clench your knife between your teeth and go off start caving skulls and slitting throats. He was. The crowd are singing La Marseillaise, and he's going over, going, "Calm down, lads! Calm down, lads! We're not at the racing yet. We don't know how it's going to play out." But that was great, and for that reason, I think it was just fantastic to see Zarco winning, just because it rewarded the fans for and Le Mans for everything that Le Mans is.
Yeah, my moment is also Quartararo related, but it's actually more to do with his crash in the race because it really just set the stage for Zarco to suddenly, coming out of the wings and occupy that centre spotlight, because everything had been pretty much Quartararo in the build-up. I mean, Zarco's been cheered from pillar to post, and he said, Since Thursday, they've been singing to him, they've been shouting at him. And I asked him actually during the media debrief on Saturday how he's been coping with all the attention. He said it kind of goes in waves. It like builds up to a point where he just wants to run away and escape it all, but then he gets excited again, and then he doesn't mind being stopped by all the fans. But the crash by Quartararo, it was so untimely. I mean, he's there in his very sort of garish, but also quite cool special livery. And, that final turn caught out so many riders in all three classes. And it really kind of squashed the atmosphere for a moment. There was like a collective inhale from like the thousands of fans that occupy the grandstands here on the main straight. And it just sort of ruined a moment, really, that he had teed up all the way like 2 weeks ago in Spain, in Jerez, for that fantastic pole and podium finish. So, but Fabio, being sort of the nice guy that he is, ceded pretty much all the attention to Johann Zarco at the end of the day. So, and also just a note on the crash. We were kind of asking riders what that corner was like to deal with, and Quartararo was quite detailed in his explanation, because he said there's a little bit of like a ridge into the corner, and it's like 2 levels, and with the added rain it just made it a little bit more perilous. And there was actually 3 Yamahas that went down on that corner, I think. Jack Miller was another victim, and I think a lot of people had him down as one of the favorites considering the conditions. But that was my pick for the moment in the GPs. Let's talk a bit more about Johann Zarco. This guy took 7 seasons and like 4 teams to win his first race, in a pretty mixed up event at Phillip Island. And then, there was a time, I think, when joining the Honda project, when they're at their lowest ebb, you kind of wondered whether he was ever going to win another Grand Prix again. And then it was a long race today where he was just controlling things. But Dave, first of all, from watching things through the screen, and I'm sure you've had like looks at various different angles afterwards, what was kind of your take on the performance?
It was just masterful. I mean, we know Johann Zarco is good in the wet. We know that he can manage this. Also, I have to hold my hand up. I'm, one of the people who said that he would never win a race, and now he's won 2. So he's making me look like a right tit. So
well, it's unlike you to be wrong.
I know.
It was like your entire shtick for about 3 years in this podcast.
Exactly. And now he's won it. But I mean, like it was genuinely impressive. I mean, at some point I was watching the race with my wife, and at one point she was like, "I can't watch this anymore. I can't watch. It's too tense," because he was going so fast. If you look at his pace, he was, between 3/4 of a second and a second faster than anyone else when there was no need for it. But he was doing it because he could maintain that pace. He could keep the heat in his tires. He could keep the bike going. He could keep his concentration as well. And I thought, to me, I think one of the smartest thing he did was those last 2 corners through Recordomont, 13 and 14, where he just basically like eased off and cruised through almost at walking pace, because it's exactly that. Those are the 2 most dangerous corners on the track. It's where everyone was crashing. He didn't want to throw it away. He had a huge amount of he had loads to spare. He could start waving to the crowd, and the conditions were there to really catch someone out. But it was just perfect strategy. He chose the right tires. He stuck with his choice, didn't mess around, and was rewarded.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a dramatic race for Johann. That moment with his dad crying was my moment, but also I loved it when he went in the lead, because it wasn't quite clear who was leading at that point in the race. It was total chaos for about 8 laps. We had riders on different types of tires. We had the majority on slicks. We had riders that started on wets pitting to change to slicks. We had a couple who were still on wets. And then, the ones that had pitted after the warm-up lap, pitted to change bikes after the sighting lap, then had to do a double long lap penalty. So there's all this stuff going on where you were just like, what, who is where and who is on what type of tire combination? It was so difficult to follow. And then I think Zarco took the lead on lap 8. And it took about half a lap for the circuit announcer to actually recognize that it was Zarco leading. And there was this funny moment when I think he was coming out of Garage Vert at the back end of the circuit. Suddenly everyone in the grandstands just started it had got a bit subdued after Quartararo's crash. But then once the circuit announcer was like, hold on a second, Zarco's leading. And you just saw everyone in the grandstands opposite the media center rising to their feet. And it was just it was a really cool moment. And the start of his race was so complicated. He didn't engage his start device because he thought it was going to be too complicated going through turns 2 and into turn 3 to disengage it. And then he got hit by Joan Mir. We'll come on to that a bit later, I'm sure. When Bastianini tagged Bagnaia hit Mir. Zarco was so fortunate not to go down. I think he said his left hand was off the handlebar. He rejoins way back. And by lap 6, he was like 30 seconds off the lead. And I caught up with Christophe Bourguignon, his LCR's technical director, just after the race. And he was like, we got quite lucky when the rain arrived because Zarco was on wets. But if it stayed dry for another lap or two, he probably would have pitted because his life was really difficult and it was just looking like a bit of a hopeless situation. But then when it started to rain, it confirmed that the risk he took was worth it. And it ultimately paid off.
Well, like Phillip Island, I mean, Johann Zarco is becoming one of the ultimate kind of opportunity seizers, isn't he, in MotoGP? But I don't think we can fault the performance. I mean, to be able to sort of have the same tyre set on as Marc Marquez and then almost extend your lead, not only just. I mean, Zarco made a comment afterwards that he was a little bit worried because Marc closed the gap for a while, but then Zarco, like you said, Dave, was just super consistent in his lap times, and he really was just the image of experience in handling the conditions. And let's not also forget, guys, that he did this on a Honda. I mean, Alex Rins jokingly said to us in his media debrief that he was furious that, Johann Zarco had taken away that distinction that he was Honda's last winner, of course, when he won, in the circuit of the Americas. But what a day it was. We could be a little bit cynical and say, yes, it takes, crazy wet conditions for Hondas to be competitive. I mean, Taka Nakagami showing up for his first wild card and taking a top 6 finish, which is something he could have dreamed of in his last 2 to 3 seasons as a full-time MotoGP rider. But
it's probably his best. It's probably his best finish for ages for Nakagami. Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
4 years.
But I do think that the Honda. This is a sign of how much the Honda has progressed. It has much better feeling. There is much more feeling at the front, and that is exactly what helped the Honda. It's what helped Zarco actually sort of get that result because he had the feedback from the front. He could feel the limit all the way around. He doesn't need the power. The horsepower becomes irrelevant in wet races, but front end field you really get rewarded by. So yeah, I mean that to me is a sign of, ironically, it's a sign of the progress that Honda is making.
And I think from Thursday, most of the MotoGP riders that we were speaking to were aware that a situation like this could arise on Sunday. The forecast was going to be bad right away from midway through last week. And it was in Saturday night's debrief with Zarco, where he had a really good result in the sprint, coming through the 6th after a tricky qualifying. He had a big crash. And he was asked about Sunday, and he said, you know what, I think we can repeat what we did today in the dry. And if the conditions are a bit tricky, I think we have something where we can maybe play for the podium. So he had it in his mind that it was probably going to be the time to risk it. And just you have to kind of admire, firstly, the cool head to stay out in wets. We had the likes of Luca Marini out on wets early on and deciding to pit because he thought, oh God, it's too dry for this. Zarco stuck to his original decision. The power of his convictions, and it was paid off spectacularly. And just, I think we've maybe mentioned this also, but 19 laps in the lead. When he was in the lead, that was a terribly, terribly long time to be out there. And just the kind of the space that he was given to make a mistake and to kind of have this heroic failure. I kind of really felt that was what the story of the day was going to be. But now, fair play to him. He managed to pull it off, and let's face it, like this has been. I wouldn't say this has been coming, but this has been Zarco's most impressive season, I think, since probably 2017, his debut year in MotoGP. He's just been so good. Argentina, Qatar, here, 3 exceptional weekends when he's, proven to be the pick of the Hondas and, probably one of the top guys operating in MotoGP when you consider the package he's on.
Yeah, he's been subverting expectations very much so. And, it also proves today that sport is about stories and emotion. It's not about technology. It's not about pressures. It's not about devices. It's not about incremental differences. It's about that connection. And, those scenes where he jumped over the wall at the end from Parc Ferme and addressed the crowd. And you can see how moved he was for a guy that's usually quite, reserved, I think you could say. I mean, you don't see him breaking down in tears or being overly, his backflip is probably the most extravagant display you'll get from a rider. Best
celebration ever.
Yeah, so much so that it's been aped by Jose Antonio Reda, who's doing a pretty mean season himself in Moto3 and won again today, of course. Guys, as ever in our sort of review wrap-up shows of Grand Prix, we invite sort of questions and comments from our Patreon followers, and we've got a couple. Dylan Kropp said, after a display like that, how does Zarco not have more wins?
That's a really good question. I think, I mean, both of his questions, as Neil so laid out so well, he's superb at exploiting opportunity when it arises. He's not a dominant rider. He's not obviously much better than than everyone else. But when everything comes together and he's given an opportunity, then he can exploit it. So, yeah. I mean, it's a good question. He definitely deserved some, and he definitely deserved this one.
Yeah, if we're being more critical, then you could say being on a GP23, and Ducati technology. I know he was a bit of a guinea pig for a while, testing Mule while he was in Pramac colours, but maybe there were a couple of opportunities when he should have added to the win tally there.
And he choked. There were a few chokes along the way. I think it was Silverstone 22 when he definitely had the best rhythm of anyone and crashed out of victory contention. And then it was this kind of like monkey on his back, you felt, where it was just like the longer the winless streak went on, the more destined he was to be to kind of end his career as one of those great MotoGP riders that never quite managed to win a race. A bit like Colin Edwards in that kind of mold. But yeah, safe to say he banished those demons in Phillip Island, and then in that final part of today's race, he didn't really get. Well, I mean, everyone was very nervous, I think, watching, but Zarco himself seemed just pretty collected, pretty calm, and got the job done.
But this is the other thing that we've seen all year is his mental strength. He's made so much of a step. Moving to Honda, we were all terrified he was going to fall apart the way that he did in KTM, and it's just not been that. He's just been so calm, so collected, so focused, so in control of his emotions and everything, and that I think has made the difference. Is what makes him so good.
He might also be one of the only riders for a good time yet to have won on a Saturday and a Sunday in a Grand Prix distance. Let's see if that one gets superseded at some point. Neil, this one's pretty much more for you, I think, thanks to your fantastic memory for MotoGP knowledge and trivia. But Hardy says, where does this one rank in all-time one-off victories? The drama, the history, the stage was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first French, or it was the first home rider to win a Premier Class race at the French Grand Prix since 1954. It was also France's 100th Grand Prix win, and their first in Le Mans since 2012, I think, in the Moto3 class. So, it, pretty historic stuff. I would put it right up there. Is it a one-off win if you've won a race before, though? That's a question I would ask.
Maybe it's an isolated event in itself.
But yeah, no, it was. There's no question. It was pretty special, and it was pretty out there. Zarco, in dry conditions wouldn't have been fighting for the win. That's the long and short of it. But yeah, I think just considering the occasion, there's nothing really in recent memory that is coming to mind, I must say.
I've got one for you. Danilo Petrucci and Mugello.
Yeah, that's a very good shot. Yeah, I would go with
Dave,
that. Yeah.
Martin Darlington says, with Joan Mir crashing out again, although somewhat blamelessly this time, does this add fuel to the Zarco to factory Honda argument?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about Zarco going to the factory team, not least from Johann Zarco himself, but there's been some strange rumours wandering around the Le Mans paddock, one of which is that Jorge Martin's contract situation is a right mess with Aprilia. And if Jorge Martin's contract situation is a right mess with Aprilia, do we think that it might be Jorge Martin who goes to HRC instead of Johann Zarco? That would be a very interesting situation. And you've got to think that Jorge Martin must be absolutely bloody terrified of the Aprilia by now, because every time he sort of gets anywhere near the bike, something comes out of the ether and hurts him.
Well, I mean, look at Joan Mir's crash record. I mean, I don't think the Honda's exactly a
no,
cradle.
No, except what is it? 10 10 crashes or something. 10
in the last
10.
12.
Yeah, that's a lot of crashes. I mean, like even I could probably do better than that.
And Mir didn't speak to us afterwards. I think he's got maybe a fractured finger or something.
Yeah, and he banged his head quite badly apparently as well, which is why he was taken to hospital for observation. I think there was fears that he might be a bit concussed, so I think that was also why he didn't show up to speak to us.
Dave, one more question we had from patrons on this subject with Johann Zarco, Honda related as well. David Field says, does the win for Honda have an effect on their concession status?
It does not, because we scrapped the whole, wins. When the concessions were first introduced, it was wins and podiums that counted. Now it's a percentage of the points scored. So does it affect it? Not directly, but it does actually increase Honda's points in the concessions. So towards the middle of the season, Honda are now on 136 points. That's basically from last year's summer break to now. And they need 298 points to lose concessions. They made a big step, but it's not going to affect it. It doesn't look at the moment like Yamaha or Honda will lose concessions by the summer break, but then it gets reassessed by the end of the year. And if they keep going like this, then there's a good chance that they will move from basically Class D to Class C or Category D to Category C, which will mean they won't be able to do as much testing, won't be able to change the engines and stuff. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's great. It's just really, really good for Honda.
Yeah, and it's quite cool. Ducati were on course to win their 23rd successive Grand Prix on Sunday, which would be a new record for MotoGP. No, yeah, exactly, beating Honda in the process, and that run to be stopped by a Honda was quite fitting. Yeah, so the first non-Ducati win since Maverick and Coda last year, and my prediction that Ducati were going to rack up 40 straight wins was somewhat untrue, and who knew that?
Just to put the French champagne cork on this subject with Johann Zarco and also Honda, Neil, you ventured down into the paddock where, we've explained before on the paddock note shows, it's almost impossible to hear anybody when there's bikes going by or, any kind of sound. I mean, even the music was full blare at 7 a.m. this morning when I arrived in, but you managed to find someone from LCR to talk to. Who was it?
It was the team owner, Lucio Cecchinello, who stumbled out of the LCR truck, looking pretty enraptured. And shout out to the LCR team, their press officer Rennie, and actually invited all the journalists to come down to the garage straight after the race to celebrate with them all. So you were able to go in and talk to some people, it was cool. So I grabbed a couple of minutes with Lucio, and unsurprisingly, he was in very high spirits indeed. I'm here with Lucio Cecchinello after what has been one of the most dramatic and crazy races I think I can remember in MotoGP. Lucio, how was that second half of the race? Has your heart rate slowed down yet?
Well, actually, I had the headset and I could feel my heart, beating, and on the believe me, on the headset, boom, 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 boom. It was really, really intense. Of course, because the conditions, but as well because of the fact that we were looking at the second fastest rider, who was Marc Marquez, that normally in this condition is amazing, And the fact that we were lapping almost 1 second faster than Marc, we were, very, very worried, and especially seeing the crashes of Alex Marquez and some other crashes. Then we said, wow, this is really, really tricky and dangerous situation. We don't want and we don't need to go so fast, But finally, he made it, and then he said that he was feeling good with the bike and just stay concentrated, and that is amazing.
Yeah. He was in the minority of riders going to the grid on wets. Was your plan clear with him before that it was going to rain quite substantially during the race time?
Honestly, yes. We of course look at the different weather radar applications, and then I met him just before he put the helmet on, and then I showed physically the images, and then I said, this cell of rain will come in 20 minutes. So I believe that also this helped him to to trust, because he visually got some information, and then to trust that it was the right choice to stay on the wet.
Yeah. Just a quick word about Johann, because he's been in fantastic form this season, riding I think maybe better than ever, and as a person to work with, you must be just so happy for him. And what's he brought to your team?
Well, when we started this project back in 24, we knew that Zarco was an extremely professional and talented rider, because we already worked with him during the season. During the 2019, he replaced Nakagami for a couple of races. And then we had no doubt that we could have, a very good rider in our team that with the zero potential to help Honda to rebuild, the competitiveness. And for us, what he made today is once again the confirmation that we are doing a correct job. And winning Le Mans, it's simply fantastic. It's a dream come true.
Yeah. And just finally, I remember speaking to you after Cal won his first race in Brno 2016. You were very emotional then. Is it a similar kind of feeling right now?
Yes, absolutely similar kind of feeling. But I would say that here the massive support from the fans, and the affection we receive, the love we receive from them, we feel even more emotion, and this is more emotional for all of us. And especially, I don't hide you, when I was in the podium, there was a French national anthem, and seeing all this crowd of people singing and being so proud for Johann Zarco victory and be part of this success, I don't hide you that I had some tear in my eyes.
Well, Lucio, an amazing day, an amazing story, and I'll let you go and celebrate with the team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back to our French Grand Prix wrap. Before we move on, a quick reminder that we're backed by Renthal Street. So if you're after any bars, clip-ons, grips, chain wheels, or any other accessories for your street bike, then go to renthal.com and check out the Fit My Bike option to find the exact component you need for your particular model of motorcycle. Thanks to Renthal Street for backing the Paddock Pass podcast. Let's talk about a couple of the other riders. Dave and Neil, Marc Marquez getting back on the podium. He gave out some pretty good quotes post-race, saying that the crash and the mistake that he made in Jerez helped fashion his mentality towards this very risky race. He said if he had perhaps won in Jerez or had a normal Grand Prix, then he was 80% likely to have crashed out today. And then, of course, Fermin Aldeguer, we have to give him some props, because he made the podium for the first time in the sprint, and then did the same thing again today, passing Pedro Acosta, who was pretty peeved with his rear tyre choice. He just had no grip left. Actually, he was struggling for grip through most of the race, but then Aldeguer managed to charge. I have to be honest, I thought out of all the riders really pushing at the front of this Grand Prix, Aldeguer will be the one that ended up on his arse again, and he managed to make it to the finish line. So it's credit in different ways to different riders.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most impressive, Marc Marquez was extremely impressive because he didn't crash, exactly as you said. Like if he'd have won in Jerez, then maybe he would have crashed. But he realized really early on, okay, Zarco is too fast for me. Pecco's out. Alex Marquez was at that point behind him. All he had to do was just stay in it, because he had, I think, for a lot of the race, he had about 2 seconds on Alex before Alex crashed. It was just a really, really sensible race by Marc, scoring a lot of points, taking a big lead in the championship. That was sensible. And Aldeguer was just really, really class. I think I did feel sorry for Pedro Acosta, but the people who gambled on it raining were the people who got it right. I feel sorry for Bagnaia. I mean, we'll come to Bagnaia later, but he started on the right tyres and he should have done a lot better. But the getting the tyre choice really mattered. In the end, this was quite, tyres were quite an important factor here.
Yeah. Mark did. I think it was Mark and Alex were both pretty adamant that they got their strategy right. Pulling in at the end of the siding lap and switching to slicks. They felt that they were able to basically exploit the track when it was dry and then switch to wets when it was the right time. Aldeguer stayed out for an extra lap and ended up being penalised for that, lost a lot of time on that one. And I think if Marc was maybe a little more inclined to risk it, then, maybe we could have seen something up front. But probably not, actually. I'll rule that out on the spot because Zarco was just untouchable today.
Yeah.
Marc realised that quite quickly. But yeah, super intelligent ride, you would have to say, from him. He was using Alex as the guide throughout, which is quite interesting. He wasn't like, okay, what do I do? It was like, let's take a cue from my brother. And when Alex went in on the side-in lap, he thought, okay, I think I'll do the same. He just knew the rider ahead was no threat in the championship. And it reminded me a little bit of Jack Miller's first MotoGP win in 2016. Valentino Rossi crashed out, I think, of the lead in that race, who was fighting Marc for the championship in that particular year. Marc had seen that, and Miller was no threat to him in that year in the championship, and did the same thing of just coming home in second. And that was one of those crucial afternoons, in which he went on to take a big step for the championship. So, despite crashing out of 2 races, he's back up to, I think, a 20-point lead in the series, and just in a very, very commanding position as a result of this.
I think he's wrong to claim that they had the right strategy, because if you look at what happened to Zarco in that first corner, he did get run off. He got stuffed right through the gravel, and he probably lost 4 or 5 seconds through there. So, yeah, I think the right choice was to start on wets and to try to manage through those early laps, because I was looking at the rain radar and you could see that the rain was coming. There was a lot of rain coming. It's just that the question was when would it arrive? I think Marc is wrong, and I think also he could have quite easily see that was wrong just by looking at the person next to him on the podium.
Yeah, it's, just to try and highlight what a crazy day it's been. Like I mentioned, I arrived at the track quite early. It was sunny then it poured with rain, and we had a very sort of wet warm-up. Moto3 was right on the threshold of being a wet race. Finally, the field went off on slicks. And then, of course, this sort of low cloud rolled in again. There's no truth to the rumour that Marc Marquez was considering swapping his Alpine Stars boots for some running shoes while he was on the grid. And then
Although he was doing calf stretches.
Yeah, he was limbering up, that's for sure. But it was like general chaos. I think Brad Binder, when he spoke to us afterwards, was quite succinct in his description to saying, there were tires everywhere. They were on the bike, they were being carried on the grid, they're being prepped in the garage. It was like, and we know contacts in teams that just said that, various languages were flying through the headsets, just trying to get things organized and make a decision on where to go. But, credit to people. Somebody like Johann Zarco calls on his experience, all those Grand Prix and all those situations and those previous chokes we've mentioned. Marc Marquez the same, but Fermin Aldeguer, another year in which a rookie has burst through. Add the names Pedro Acosta, Marco Bezzecchi, Ea Bastianini not so long ago. It does seem that MotoGP is tough. This is something we were talking about in the Paddock Note Show, Neil, that, Aldeguer has a Ducati, therefore he's one of 6 blessed riders on the grid and he's expected to perform. But, it's still pretty early in the season. And I think we have to be not too surprised that, some of his raw talent and ability is able to shine.
Yeah, that talent and ability, I think, was pretty clear from the moment he rocked up in the Moto E championship back in 2021 as like a 17-year-old and stuck it on the front row in his first Moto E race. That's pretty rare. Everything he did in Moto 2 suggested that he had ridiculous talent, lots and lots of rough edges. As we saw last year, expectation, I think, got the better of him. And there were a couple of times where he just wilted under pressure. But you have to say fair play to Fermin, because the last 4 rounds now he's shown podium potential. Austin, Qatar, Jerez, and here, crashed out of both Austin and Jerez. The speed, he was at one point, I think, quicker than Zarco towards the end of the race. And that is with very limited experience in the wet on the MotoGP machine. And also on a track where he doesn't really, Moto2, he was never really great at stop and go tracks like here or like Austria. He was absolutely fantastic all weekend long. I am tempted to also add that this is just a sign of how good the GP24 is. That a guy that, I think I said this in the note show last night, if a guy that's had his arse completely handed to him by Aigura in last year's championship, yet just looks like a rider operating on a different level completely this year at the moment. And yeah, I think that that's pretty much the bike doing the majority of that. Yeah. Well, not the majority, but it's doing a good deal of that.
And the team. I mean, the Gresini team is, just look at their record. They've been so good. They have had, wins with Bastianini, with Alex Marquez, with Fabio Di Giannantonio, with Marc. Yeah, I mean, they're just a quality outfit. And they are the only pure satellite team. That to me, they basically pay their money, they get their bikes, and that's your lot. They've got Fermin now on a factory contract, but generally the riders riding for them are signing their contract not with Ducati but with Gresini themselves.
So was this result more, or is this more bike or rider, Dave? Asking
conditions
and conditions. Okay,
conditions. I think the sprint.
But he was on the podium in the sprint. I mean, he's there
exactly.
all dry. He's
a class rider. Everything came together for him to be able to perform. But the bike is very, very good. He is also very, very good. But let's see what happens later on in the year.
Are there splinters in your bum, Dave, as you get up from the fence there? Is it the bike or the rider? Tell us.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, how high is the fence, Dave? We don't topple off when it's only
not like
2
you,
foot
Dave.
high. Let's talk a bit about the chaos that led into the Grand Prix, because understandably it led to quite a few questions. Neil, we were just trying to work out what on earth is going on, looking through the windows here in the media center. So I think we have to give full props to sort of the Dorna TV crew, the whole Dorna production crew, in fact, for the way that they presented the race, way that they were trying to explain what was going on, everything from the commentary to the graphics to the various angles we were shown. I think, the whole sort of squad here on the ground tried to, keep track of what was going on. I mean, there was even a time when we knew that the new system of penalties were riders having a double long lap. I mean, how was that going to work in practice? I mean, in theory, you could have had 4 or 5 riders trying to do it together, and it would have been chaos. But I think it was Marc Marquez. I can't remember who was explaining to us, or maybe Binder again, just saying they had to wait for the alert to come up on the dash, and then they were able to, embark on that sort of 2-lap penalty process, I guess. I'm not too sure if there were any riders that didn't manage to do it and, might have to pay for it again at a later Grand Prix.
I think Binder didn't, or Binder thought he hadn't done both of them, but then because he crashed out, I don't think it carries over. If he hadn't have completed, if he'd finished the race and not completed his second long lap, then it would have carried over. But because he crashed out, then, he's been punished enough.
Well, Neil, I mean, Just Jono says, what are our thoughts on the new starting procedure and the bike changes? I mean, it looked like it worked better than Cotta. What do you reckon? Yeah,
I mean, speaking to the riders after the race, pretty much everyone was uniform in the decision that everyone knew what was going on. Everyone knew what was going to happen if they were to start, or if they were to switch to from wet to dry before the race started. Just before the race started, they all knew that they were going to have a double long lap penalty. That was very clear to them. I think the majority of people watching, the commentary team, the TV production, it was very clear that was what was going to be. You had a situation in Austin where Pecco Bagnaia wouldn't have had a ride-through penalty because he left pit lane in his siding lap on slicks, then changed to wets, then ran back into pit lane and changed back onto slicks. I mean, that is a very contrived kind of situation, which would have been, the casual viewer would have been completely lost in that kind of situation. Whereas I think this is all, it's a lot more uniform, a lot more clear. So it was total chaos, and it was really difficult to keep a hold of what was going on. But as you said, props to Matt Burton, Lewis Sotheby, who were able to tell us, okay, watch out for Miller, watch out for Zarco, because the guys on wets and the rain is starting. Everyone's, the guys that are on slicks are starting to change back onto wet tires again, and this is going to be the kind of the shape of the race when they do that. And it turned out to almost be true because Miller crashed out just in that critical moment. But
Yeah, among the chaos, there was a strand of cohesion. So, like I mentioned, props where it's due. Dave Ling Big sent us a question saying, do you think there are some teams that are better in figuring out the wet race scenarios than others?
Yeah, 100%. Though I couldn't name them off the top of my head, but yeah, it is. Everyone has a rain radar. Everyone is using more or less the same apps. Everyone knows the rules, and I really liked this new change because it made it so much easier to understand exactly what was going on and what the penalty was for certain decisions. But yeah, there are teams who understand better what the consequences of each particular choice is. So in the end, it's always a gamble because you could see rain coming, but there's always going to be a difference between, is it going to be a light rain, a slightly heavier than light rain, a really, really heavy rain. So the amount of water on the track is always going to be a variable and difficult to predict. But yeah, the experience of knowing, okay, this is what it looks like. This is when to come in. This is when, you should be starting on the soft wets or the medium wets, because again, that's it. The medium wet is almost an intermediate in that you use it on a drying track. It's hard enough to actually sort of stay together, but you do lose a lot of grip if you use that in the on a very wet track, which is exactly what happened to Pedro Acosta and a number of other riders as well. As soon as you're getting more and more water on track, then you really started seeing the people on medium wets start to go backwards, and the soft wets, where you can keep the heat in the tire and keep the grip, they were going forwards.
Dave, David Fields said, should there be an intermediate tire?
No, because I mean, like when they've had intermediates in the past and nobody's used them, they get used very sparingly in World Superbike. I mean, the thing about intermediates is you produce your intermediates and then you use them once every 3 years, because here intermediates would have been absolutely the wrong choice. You would have ended up staying with them for too long. You would have the right choice was. Well, the right choice was Johann Zarco's choice, was to go out on soft wets, manage it in the first race, and wait for the rain to come, because you knew that the rain was coming. So I mean you can, but it's a lot of extra cost and complication especially for the tire manufacturer, for very little gain.
And how long would the intermediates in today's race, for example, been of use? I mean, maybe like 1 or 2 laps, but really you're going to have to change them anyway.
Yeah, you would have been slower when it was dry. You would have carried on for a couple of extra laps while it was raining, and still lost out to someone who actually took the gamble, left on soft wets, and took advantage in those last sort of 10-15 laps. Wet races are really long. There's a long time, and when the gaps are 1, 2, 3 seconds a lap between rider lap times, then yeah, the sort of marginal gains of an intermediate go to waste.
In terms of the championship, there were a couple of I mean, the biggest news, of course, we should talk about Pecco Bagnaia quickly. In terms of the race, there were a couple of different stories. I mean, Enea Bastianini, who was the instigator of the problem on the first corner, or on the first lap, I should say, in turn 3. I mean, he had a crazy race, had 2 long laps to do. One for the actually still has to do. He will have a long lap penalty ahead of him because of the
for 5 in total, 2 lots of 2 double long laps,
and 2
it was
crashes.
Hard to get. Yeah, exactly. It was actually pretty much he's getting to the point where he just automatically does the long lap because that's more or less what he's expected to do.
Carried over to the next race.
Yes. I mean, it's almost like he just wanted to add on like 5 extra laps to his race distance. I mean, why not? I mean, one of the things he was blameless for, I mean, he told us he exited sort of the pit box, and the limiter hadn't been sort of stuck on. So when he throttled it, he was immediately over the limit of 60 kilometers an hour. So he was in trouble from that point. If we look at everyone else, I mean, Raul Fernandez getting his best finish of the season of what he claims he now has a base set up with the RSGP Aprilia and Trackhouse colours, for once outperforming his rookie team at Ayagura. So a decent day for him as well. But guys, we have to talk about Bagnaia because this was a big weekend. He gave quite a heartfelt media debrief on Saturday, I think it was, where he said, or maybe Friday, where he said, listen, that's it. We can't change this GP25 spec anymore, and I'm going to have to change my style. I don't have any front end feeling. And he had another torrid or just incidentful Grand Prix race today where he seemed to be in the pit lane more than he was on track.
Yeah, I mean, it must be really, really hard for him to take what's happening right now, because he's used to having slow starts in MotoGP, but he is also used to Ducati kind of fixing any sort of early season problems that he has roughly round about the Jerez test. And it seems as though he came to the conclusion after the Jerez test that, and Ducati came to the conclusion as well, that this is the way the bike is, and you're just going to need to adapt to it, my friend. He said it's the first time since 2020 that he doesn't have that real feeling of confidence when he's braking at full power and then entering into the turn. So you're basically depriving Pecco of his great strength. You throw into the mix that he crashed out when he wasn't really anywhere near the limit in the sprint. He was taken out of Sunday's race when he had made the correct tire call. He then had to pit after that because I think his gear lever it was a bit bent.
Yeah,
there was a few other little bits of damage to his bike. So they then had to pit, change bikes onto the slick tires, and then pit again to go back out on wets, but that was necessitated by the crash. So just a desperate weekend overall. And you mentioned his debrief side. I mean, I sensed just an air of resignation from his debriefs this weekend that it's going to be one of those years, and it's already getting away from him. You didn't really get a sense of hope from him. Mark, in the form that he's in, if it was a dry race today, Mark could have probably won by 4 or 5 seconds. And there's no real sign of Pecco finding that magic which he's relied on in the last couple of years. So, pretty desperate situation, you would have to say.
It creates a situation for the conspiracy theorists as well, right, Dave?
But I mean, conspiracy theorists never really need an excuse, do they? It's just, I mean, look, first of all, this bike hasn't been designed by Marc Marquez. Marc Marquez first saw this bike at, sort of Barcelona's hang, really. This bike has been developed by Enea Bastianini and Pecco Bagnaia. That's the data and Jorge Martin.
Jorge Martin.
Yeah, exactly. That's the data that Ducati used and decided to build this bike. Then, of course, we got to the Sepang and the bike didn't work. The GP25, the engine was wrong, and they went back to what they called the 24.9 or something, which is basically a GP24 engine but modified to fit the GP25 frame. But that seems to have changed the weight balance or something in the bike, which is costing his front end. I do feel that Pecco Bagnaia, it felt like the gods were against him in Le Mans, because he had absolutely no blame really in this result. This was mostly Enea Bastianini's fault for taking him out in the first corner, and it wasn't quite sort of Loris Capirossi-esque on Bagnaia, but it was quite boneheaded. But Bastianini was coming very fast. Yes, Bagnaia was braking sort of quite early because he was on the wets, but it was very much Bastianini's fault. And as Neil said, the problem was Bagnaia had made the right choice. He was on the right tyres. That crash ruined everything. It meant that he had to go back in, and they've got his bike there, sort of set up on slicks. You no longer, when you change bikes, you don't have to change from one set of tires to the other. You can stick with the same set of tires. But the thing is, in a flag to flag race, you always want 2 different bikes. So he's out on his wet bike. He comes in and he's got a dry bike, but the dry bike is obviously no good because it's still raining. So yeah, just everything was against him. He sounded absolutely despondent. He said, I can't ride it. Also, with the lack of feeling on the front end, you really need that in in the wet. You know, you need to be able to get feedback, and it's just not getting any feedback from the bike. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he goes in Silverstone, because Silverstone is such a good track for him. But he's 51 points behind. There are 590, is it 2 or 4 points still up for grabs? 592 points still up for grabs. That's 10 points. Will be getting on for sort of, he needs to outscore Marc by 10%, which is a lot and difficult.
Yeah, I mean, he was telling us like on Saturday that he's going to go to the garage, he's going to try and work on some solutions. Of course, the team never had a chance to, practice or have a trial of any of those ideas to improve his feeling. Silverstone's going to be the next chance. So let's, as you said, Dave, let's see if there is some kind of improvement in Bagnaia's fortunes. For people who are Pecco Bagnaia fans, then, Neil and I have been doing our paddock note shows on Patreon, where we've been discussing his plights through each day of this Grand Prix. So if you want to find out more and know more detail, then just get on the Patreon channels and access those recordings, those shorter podcasts, and yeah, you'll be able to find out a bit more. Moving on to a higher and fire section, just before, I just want to set this up by pointing out that, one thing we need to discuss is a little bit the new Baggers series that's going to launch in MotoGP in 2026. Dave, don't sigh too loudly. And, we should discuss it. Does it have a place in MotoGP? I understand it happening in Moto America, but my wider point is that the people from Harley Davidson who made the trip over from Milwaukee to launch this thing yesterday, got exactly the window of promotion or the view of it at this Grand Prix, because we had a record attendance, well over 300,000 people,
120,000
time on race day. That was the figure, and it did feel like it. I mean, it was absolutely packed. When I parked my car inside the circuit this morning, the fences were already lined, and it was just, the sun was just popping up. So it's not just Jerez who has a monopoly on fans getting into a track when it's still dark to get their place by the fence. So yeah, on that note, Dave, I want to go into your hire and fire options. Can you explain to us what your rationale and your thinking is on this occasion?
Well, my higher option is Claude Michy, the promoter of the Le Mans race, because, I mean, what an event, what a spectacle. The fact that he does get 120,000 people through the door is just incredibly impressive. It's always a fantastic event. The atmosphere is second to none. Like I say, you don't want to be around there after dark, but that's me.
It feels a bit better now than it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite possible, just because society is changing as well. It's not as bad. It's not as bad as it was. But
because things are so much better in society, Dave, than they were, right? Like 10 years ago.
Yeah, there's no wars or conflict or discrimination or anything.
No,
anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah, well, leaving that to one side. But yeah, I mean, no, but I mean, like the social norms. It also seems like it feels like there's more families and less, fewer young men on their own who enjoy a little bit of mayhem. He said, as a chaos fanatic himself. But fantastic event. What can you say? They're so good at keeping everyone in the track, making it an enjoyable experience, just making it special
and affordable.
Yes, but also it's much easier to make it affordable when you've got 120,000 people coming through the door. It's just it's the economics of scale.
It's fair to say as well that most of the crowd would have thought this is great. I mean, yeah, people were getting wet. It wasn't the hottest temperatures. I mean, Saturday was much better, but after the spectacle seen today, you would imagine that a great percentage of this crowd, I think, right, I'm going to put Le Mans in the calendar again to come back next year, which is, this is something that especially the UK has been lacking, just that sort of that inspiration to be able to make a great event, make a great atmosphere, and pull people back in. Who was your hire, Neil?
I mean, quite a few candidates. Jose Antonio Rueda for securing his 4th win of the season in a weekend when he never really looked like winning. This was slightly fortuitous, but he still managed to get the job done in sort of battling circumstances, and those are circumstances where he doesn't normally thrive. You'd also say Marc Marquez for his mature ride and his extension or his retaking of the championship lead. But I'm going to plump with my new fancy, and that is Mr. Maverick Vinales. I mean, just what can you say about this guy? It's three races in a row now that he's just blowing our minds and impressing us. And can we really think of him now as a guy that is trustworthy and you can actually look at and think, yeah, he's going to be in the top 5 at Silverstone?
Yes, I believe so. I
Hey,
think you're going to start remarking on his hairstyle, his abs, and his tattoos next.
Yeah.
He's so good at Silverstone as well. So, yeah, you can't write him off at Silverstone.
Just a really great weekend here. I think he had, aside from Mark, probably the second fastest pace on the Friday. Complicated start to the sprint where he was fighting with Binder and Acosta, and maybe you sensed he was getting frustrated, but he didn't do anything stupid. He let Acosta make the mistake on the final lap and took profit of that to finish, a solid 5th. And then we know that Maverick hates these kind of conditions. Like, how many flag-to-flag races did we see him just completely disappearing in the past? Usually at weekends where he had great potential. Yet he comes home with a very solid 5th place finish. I think it's just, I mean, we're looking at this guy as maybe riding in the best moment of his career, bringing just this kind of fresh energy, this fresh eye to KTM, which obviously is going through its difficulties. And I just love the guy. I don't really have much more to say.
I did notice how you scurried along to his media debrief today, Neil. You made it just in time. So, the fandom is real, everybody.
Yeah,
I'm going
exactly.
to be a little flippant with my higher end, say Manu Gonzalez, because not only is he the reference in Moto2 at the moment, but he's very unlikely to get hired by anybody in MotoGP next year, unfortunately. One of those weird things in sport that just timing, crossroads moments, and whatever else. I just don't think there's going to be a viable MotoGP seat that opens up for the Spaniard. He might have to stay in Moto2 and defend his title, which a certain Frenchman who was victorious today did.
Yeah.
And he was, I think, one of the last to do so, if I remember rightly, in Moto2. Was there anybody else who won and then stayed around and tried to win it again?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's used it as a stepping stone. They've either won a GP or they won a championship and vaulted straight out. So, Gonzalez can, watch Zarco in more than one way today. Dave, who was your fire?
Well, my fire, first of all, is the person who decides that 311,000 people turned up at Le Mans.
Because here we go.
311,000 people did not turn up at Le Mans. 120,000 people turned up at Le Mans, which is amazing, absolutely amazing, genuinely superb. And most of those people turned up for more than one day, which is even more amazing. So why the inflated numbers? But leaving that aside, Enea Bastianini, because that was an incredibly boneheaded move right at the start. Speeding. Sure, it's not his fault speeding in pit lane, but it was just a bonehead. It was a real Bastianini weekend. Enea Bastianini, he has these weekends sometimes where you just think, oh, for God's sake, Enea, you're so much better than this. But this weekend he wasn't. So he's my fire.
We did ask in our predictions post just before the weekend started. One of the questions was slightly tongue-in-cheek: how many expletives will be in David's rant with regards to the new French Grand Prix attendance record? Quite a few people were just saying enough. Probably. What was it?
Whoever said infinite was absolutely correct.
Tom Cumber went for 25 seconds, but I think the winner was actually, let me just see. Was it OG Spinucci? Oh, no, sorry. Fulgaz Ricardo, who said 42 seconds. That was a 42-second rant, but I didn't actually hear any expletives. So well done, Dave.
Yeah, Dave, you do know that every 24 hours, time and the perception, the record of time, it resets, right? There's a new day. So therefore, if you have a certain amount of people on one day and then you have a certain amount of people on another day... They said
311,000 fans. They said 300... They weren't... They didn't spring from Zeus's forehead like leader and then turn up at bloody... at the gates the next day. These were exactly the same people who turned up for multiple days. Again, it's amazing. It's fantastic. It's just really, really impressive what they've managed to do. But it's not 311,000 fans.
No, I think we're going to have to reassess the length of the rant. Maybe somebody else won now. Maybe the infinite one, could be in contention. My fire, maybe a little harshly. It's a toss-up between Marco Bezzecchi again, just cannot get a groove
Yeah.
going on the Aprilia. He had his own mistakes on Saturday. He says he's struggling, with a slipstream, struggling to follow riders, which is obviously a pretty serious point at the moment. Got to give him some leeway because he's still adjusting to a whole new world in MotoGP, Ducati free. And, I also have a little nod to Alex Marquez because this was the first chink in the armor. And we haven't mentioned him so far on the podcast, but, 2 crashes today. The second one he cited as his mistake with a slightly damaged GP24, but it looked just like a cold tire with the way that he grabbed the brake and went straight down. And I think he was lucky to escape uninjured from that one. But the first mistake was, that was calamitous and really sort of, gave Marc Marquez, his brother, of course, like all the points that he managed to scrape back over him or was gifted to him in Jerez. So, Alex Marquez having the joys of winning the home Grand Prix and then the utter misery of sort of, the other end of the scale. So not really fires, I would say, but just some dishonourable mentions. Who's in your category, Neil?
Yeah, I think Alex Marquez I was going to mention him. You've done that job for me. Luca Marini, I think, deserves a shout. Started on wets, had made the correct choice. He'd made the correct choice, but didn't have the strength of his convictions and pitted for slicks just before it started raining again, which meant that, he was pretty much guaranteed a spot in the top 3, 4, 5. And he threw that away. Eventually came on home in 10th was it? I think. Sorry, 11th. So Luca really shot himself in the foot in that one. But I'm going to plump for Jack Miller because this was arguably Jack Miller's race to lose. Like Zarco, he had made the correct choice. He didn't have any drama in the first Dunlop chicane. And I think was many seconds ahead of Zarco before everyone pitted from slicks onto wets. And you would have had a significant advantage over the Frenchman. Whether he would have been able to kind of hold him off towards the end of the race, that's another question. But certainly Miller was looking at a podium finish here, and fell victim to turn 14. The last corner on the track, and Miller afterwards was just absolutely despondent. Devoed, I think, was the word he used to describe his mood, which I'm assuming is Australian slang for devastated. And God, I really sounded old there, didn't I? So boring and old. I didn't mean to.
Well, I saw you type Devoed and thought of Devo, the 1970s, 80s pop band. So yes, that's punk band, much older than you. I have a question for the group. Do we like flag to flag races? Do we like this this sort of thing, or do you? Because there were a few people saying no, they should. I love them absolutely. I love them. Yeah, exactly. But there's a few people saying no, it's ruined. They should stop it. They should red flag it and restart and do.
No.
Right, good. Okay, we're all on the same page there.
The only bit I thought was the pit lane start. I was thinking, this. There were shades of Saxon Ring there.
Yeah, but it wasn't a start. But again, it's start of the warm up lap, so it's fine. That's again, it's much safer. Everyone goes, they all take their position, and they do the double long lap. So no, I thought it was superbly handled.
It's not something you want in every race, but how many flag to flags? You get a flag to flag once every 2 seasons, maybe. In particular years you might get 1 or 2 in the same season, because they are such isolated events, and because there was a time where it was just a guaranteed Marc Marquez success in flag to flag races. We probably shouldn't avoid that fact from 2014 all the way through to 2019. But since 2020, the flag to flags have really thrown up a real kind of variety of interesting results and surprises. So I love them.
Round 7 is going to be the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. A fantastic track, historic track. We're heading to another one after being here in Le Mans. Unfortunately, guys, I think we won't be able to expect the same kind of atmosphere and crowd attendance just based on trend from recent years, but you never know. Listen, come on, Neil, don't be too cynical yet. It's, earlier in the year, a reminder as well that if you want to get to Silverstone, then book your tickets online because it's 120 quid for like a 3-day pass. If you're going to go on Sunday, it's 100. Tickets are free if you've got kids for under 11s, and there's a 15% discount for under 16s, I believe. There's entertainment going on, rock concerts, or at least music concerts every single night at Silverstone, and the campsites, of course. It's an event. It's a venue that's used to staging big motorsport fixtures, and so quick props to the people at Silverstone. Let's see if we can make the British GP a decent one. And of course, we're backed by Pole Position Travel. So if you want a hotel and a package that involves hospitality, tours, and whatever else, then go to polepositiontravel.com, enter PPOD25X. PPOD25X, and you'll get a small discount for listening and being a fan of the Paddock Pass podcast. Lastly, guys, we're going to wrap off here in France by giving our grades for this Grand Prix. Neil, you've been given lofty marks of late, so what are you going to pick this one at?
Loftier still. I'm going to give this a 10, Ed, because I don't know. Every now and again, sport provides you with moments that you look back on and you think about and you recall, and you maybe get a little emotional about it. Maybe you get a little tear in the eye about it. And I really do think in a couple of years' time, when I think back to today, and I think of Johann Zarco singing the Marseillaise on the podium, or seeing his parents cry in the pit lane, or seeing him cry when he was running over to the grandstands. I mean, that is going to trigger an emotional response in me. And it wasn't even the most exciting race in the second half, but it was so tense and there was so much riding on it that it was completely engaging. And that, coupled with the drama, the surprise, the kind of unexpected nature of what happened today, I think this is going to live long in the memory. So, a fat 10 from me.
It's a good point, because if Marc Marquez had been out in the lead, then, there still would have been that tension. He could possibly dump it. But then, with Johann Zarco being there and hearing that volume all the way around the track, it just made things that much more intense. What was your grade, Dave?
I'm going to turn it all the way up to 11, because that was, for all the reasons that Neil said, it was magic. It had all of the ingredients that make sport magical. Superb.
Yeah, I agree. This is MotoGP, and if you were sort of any kind of representative or stakeholder in Liberty Media, then there's lots of reasons to think, okay, we've made a pretty good job in trying to acquire this property, and the potential is there. So I'll say a good 9.5. You can always strive.
Oh, that's harsh. Oh, that is harsh.
You're just saying that because it's in France and you're English, aren't you?
Exactly. No. Remember Agincourt.
Don't cast me. I would love to visit Agincourt. Don't tar me with that brush, Neil Morrison. Anyway, guys, it's been great to chat about this memorable round of MotoGP. We'll be back soon with a latest show. Neil, we did an interview of Jose Poncharal that was pretty interesting, so we'll see if we can throw that up on Patreon or get it out as a separate podcast next week, because before long we'll be previewing Silverstone, and we'll be on to the next episode of the 2025 season.